Hello and welcome to Hilloway Park in Minnetonka, Minnesota. Meet Minnetonka City Foresters Hannibal and Aaron. Part of their job is to manage this city park. While this park is only 20 some acres, it feels like it could be hundreds. Their management needs to keep this effect while managing the trees for health and safety. This stand of red pine was planted by the previous landowner in the 1960s. The trees aren't in any particular order and have never been formally managed. The result is a lot of tall and slender trees growing rather slowly. Foresters call this an overstocked stand. The trees' crowns are limited in size by two factors. The first is light, which determines how tall the leafy area of the tree can be. Red pine doesn't like shade very much, which makes the leafy area of these trees rather short. Maybe 10 to 15% of the tree's height. Foresters call this the live crown ratio. The second factor is how wide the trees can grow to find light. With neighbors on all sides and quite close together, the trees eventually run into their neighbors. Then, in the wind, they prune each other in what looks like a giraffe battle. You can see bare sticks at the end of some of the branches in the leafy areas of the crown. This is where they are beaten back to by their neighbors. Eventually, the branches are shaded out and die off. Then they decay and crumble, bit by bit, until a decay-resistant stub is left along the trunk of the tree. Once the tree's crowns touch each other, their growth rates begin to become limited. Look at this cut end from one of the trees. This 60-year-old tree grew quickly for its first 14 or so years of life. Then it took another 40 years to put on only a little bit more wood, as evidenced by the much smaller growth rings, the size of a sheet of paper per year. This yielded just enough wood to get a 6x6 out of this log. In a stand of trees with more room for each individual, the trees end up with much more leafy area and a quicker growth rate. The stand pictured is over 100 years old, with trees over 100 feet tall. The trees are 20 to 30 feet apart. In the stand at Hilloway Park, the trees are just an arm's reach from their neighbors. Taking out some trees to make room for the rest is called thinning. In tall, skinny trees like these, thinning too much can have consequences. No longer will they have the neighbor they are used to leaning on during storms and heavy winds. Some will lean too far or break or fall over. But some will take full use of this new space and grow into it with vigor. The right dosage of thinning is crucial to maximizing growth while minimizing tree failures. Hannibal and Aaron, the city foresters you met earlier, have decided on a 5% thinning for this year. Their management goals also include harvesting the thinned trees for wood products, including lumber. It is likely some of the remaining trees will eventually be harvested for similar purposes, so the thinning operations need to leave the remaining trees virtually untouched. To accomplish this, specialized techniques were used by skilled crews to harvest the thin trees in usable lengths. For some trees, this included climbing and rigging down pieces of the trees with ropes to avoid damaging neighboring trees and the native understory plants. Teams used several rigging techniques depending on the situation. This varied from traditional negative rigging to double whip rigging to minimize forces on the rigging system. Sometimes, if the drop zone, or the area where the piece could fall into, didn't have sensitive vegetation, pieces could free fall to the ground. Normally, heavy machinery would have been used to accomplish this work, but this site was tight, and the impact from the heavy machinery would have been quite noticeable to park visitors. This would have violated a key management objective of keeping the site feeling natural. Later, a team of park workers moved the logs by hand to a central location. This is more work than using a machine, but far less invasive and damaging to the remaining vegetation. This really only works for logs of this size, though. Larger logs, or logs of different species, weigh much more, making hand hauling undesirable, to say the least. This log weighed in just under 500 pounds. The logs were processed into dimensional lumber using a bandsaw mill. By processing on site, many efficiencies were realized. This included less fuel and labor resources involved in hauling the logs out of the woods and to a processing facility. Also, unused brush, log parts, including the bark, and logs too small to be turned into wood products were left where they fell or returned to the woods. There they feed the soil and remaining trees as they slowly decompose. This is an important detail when carbon sequestration is considered. Only the cut lumber was hauled out of the park to be dried at a city facility. Once it has dried, the lumber will be used by the city in various projects. Not only did the city manage this red pine stand for health and safety, but they did so in a way that preserved the feel of the space and generated a byproduct of usable lumber for future city projects.